All right. Hi there, everybody. Today I'm live with, I'll say my friend Mo. He's
Yeah.
been at my conference numerous times and gotten to know him over the years. And got to say, I'm a big fan of Mo and
Thanks, man.
looking forward to having another fun conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and we were just preparing and chatting here before it was time to go live. And Mo brought up the topic of power dynamics, and specifically in situations where we're remote, those things can create disproportionate, I would say, levels of power, and those shifts maybe are more intense. And maybe harder to address if you're the one that doesn't have the power. Mo, let's unpack this a little bit. I think it's a fascinating topic, especially when teams are kind of left to their own devices. They don't have like an
Mm.
outside facilitator or consultant that can come in and help, shift some of that around or make it apparent or name it, confront it.
Yeah, definitely. And I also have to do a shout out to the community where I polled and I said, hey, what's top of mind for you? What are the kind of pains that you're dealing with right now? And this is Pim's Chats. Pimmer leads the community for people of color. And this is where I kind of, we did a little bit of sense making and trying to understand what is it that people deal with. And that was one of the issues. How do you, like you said, Douglas, how do you ensure that people are able to visualize, are able to conceptualize, analogize what power looks like in a room? And, more and more we're dealing with a virtual room. And I think we've seen a lot of, in the past year, I think you'd agree, there was a lot of, how do we do this online thing? Right. But now we've done this online thing for so long. And, it's okay. There are parts that are working and the parts that are not. What are the parts that are not? And one of those things, one of those parts is recognizing where power lies. And that could look like how long someone speaks. It's to my understanding, it's not visually represented as yet, where you could see people, just speaking for a whole lot of time and it's going from green to red. Maybe that's going to be a Zoom feature in the future. Or what does it look like when someone is looking to suggest something different? I think the conversation between you and Elise touched on what would it look like if people were able to bring practices where they could do things together, as opposed to, carry a flag and say, we're going to try this new thing and it's going to be great. So yeah, looking forward to cracking that little nutshell a little bit more.
Yeah, specifically on the visualization of who's been talking the most, I was really intrigued by a product that came out maybe 6, 8 months ago. Gosh, it might even be 10 months or more now when that thing came out. It's called Macro, and it's an alternative UI for Zoom. It sits on top of Zoom. Unfortunately, because it's an alternative UI, then that's another layer where bugs or different interactions have to be learned and dealt with. Um, I played with it momentarily, but the thing is in order to get the benefits, everyone had to use Macro, and a lot of our workshops involve lots of people who we just met for the first time. So convincing them to download.
Yeah.
Sometimes convincing them to use Zoom is hard enough, much less download a new client. But it's beautiful concept, and the concept, everyone in the meeting are little circles, and then as you talk, your circle gets bigger, and you start to crowd out everyone else.
Oh yeah, that would be fascinating.
So it gives you this really awesome imagery that you're just like stifling, you're just like filling the room with your hot air.
Wow, I wonder what that would look like in person. Just like,
right? It's sort of like Pinocchio. Your nose is just going. Maybe it's just like, maybe everyone's wearing inflatable suits and you just
one of those sumo suits. That's what I was thinking as well. That'd be fun. Just like,
or it's like one of those things on the sides of the roads the car dealers put up, and it's like they've got a fan.
waving.
Yeah, you just kind of you start kind of normal, but then you start getting wavy and tall.
Yeah.
So it's just
Until
like
it's like, it's too
ridiculous.
much. It's too much. Yeah, you just like turn on the fan like a little higher and higher. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
work. Huh.
Man, that's
Yeah.
So like these visual cues that like, you know, you know, to me, that's one of the most compelling benefits of having a facilitator is for them to hold that space to identify who is dominating or even
Right.
who wields the power, because they might not be dominating, but they
Right.
might be stifling just because they're there.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
because they're holding the marker and they're standing at the wall, at the whiteboard, not even saying anything, but it's impacting how people are showing up and what they're saying.
Definitely. And I think it's you know, it's very interesting how quickly organizations, larger organizations, can you know, access consultants, right? Like larger, you know, name brand consultants to help them through a challenge. But a lot of the work doesn't happen at that, you know, scale. It happens in the sort of the micro scale where the meetings occur, right? And where people are understanding how to relate to each other or and work together. And you know, the average, I think one thing that's kind of really kind of stuck with me a few years ago, I came across, which was how I think something like 60% of managers who are promoted in the first year underperform and understand that they underperform. They basically have no training whatsoever. It's just, you're doing a job very well. Here you go, become a manager. And the power that you're given is that legitimate power, right? You have a title, and this title is the one that gives you that power. And if people don't understand how to lead a team, then that legitimate power turns into coercive power. Just do what I tell you or else, right? You know, there'll be a stick at the end of the year. So what you say is very accurate in that having a facilitator is important, because someone that's outside of that system that can look at it and recognize it for what it is, or just be able to pause and breathe alongside, you know, not only the manager, but also the team is very powerful. And shifting that power so that everyone is, I like what Brene Brown says, you know, sitting on the same side of the table, like looking at the same image as opposed to opposing sides, especially understanding that a manager is in a position, the unique position of having the information flow from, you know, one part of the organization to another, and being able to define what that is. And I found a lot of really good managers are able to just silence the noise, right? The noise that's coming from elsewhere, to be able to protect the team, so the team understands like what is the work that is actually important to get done here, and where do we, you know, respond versus react to things. Whereas managers that are not so great are just reacting, and stressing out everyone else, and things don't work out. So do what I tell you, I'll find someone else. So
yeah. You know, it brings me back to this notion of facilitated leadership, or even servant leadership. And I think that the more that anyone given that's been ordained with power, managers, you know, directors, whoever, taking some training and facilitation, or just learning a few tricks. Because the thing is like, often these moves, these behaviors, these this rule book, if you will, are employed in workshops. And workshops are great, but it's really transformative when you apply these concepts and these approaches to everyday meetings. And you know, that was really the inspiration for the Magical Meetings book, is like, how can we take these little moves, these little ideas, and bring them into to borrow them. So that would be my biggest advice for teams that are struggling. You know, they're disempowered. They don't know how to make change. I would say just focus on your meetings. You know, how can you create more equitable meetings, either through participation, through some of the dynamics around how you are more purposeful. And you brought up a really interesting thing earlier, and this notion, because we always talk about connection elicits collaboration.
Hmm.
And because it creates empathy and understanding, and it's just a foundation. If you don't have that
Right.
connection, then nothing else good is going to really be consistent or reliable. And I loved your story about starting with that understanding, with getting to know each other and building trust and rapport.
Right.
And then I think you were talking about your son being sick recently.
Yeah, yeah. So my son was sick over the weekend. He's good now, and there's a lot of work that we needed to deliver. But every time the people I work with checked in, it was like status report. How's your kid? Right? It wasn't like what's happening with the work, right? And I think I'm very privileged in that I was able to have the time to build the kind of relationships that would allow me to be in this kind of position where people would look out for me and mine, as opposed to like the work will happen, right? Like
Mm.
we all know how productivity works. If we don't, you're productive a certain number of hours, you're not productive 9 to 5, right? So you will get the work done. A lot of the other time is just wasted, communicating, right? Or just batting away emails. So I think it's very powerful to have connection, and it's also people believe it's a luxury, right? And because they believe it's a luxury, in the before times, as people say, it used to be like the ping pong tables and having beer after work, but that's not really where connections form initially, like one to one, right? So
Mm.
how do you get people to get to know each other, in the one to one? Then you can expand that out, right? So two makes a meeting, three makes a culture. So how do you build that into the fabric of people's lives, and especially now that people need help?
So coming back to that team where you had you clearly were successful in building relationships to the point where they were looking out for you, and prioritizing you over the work. Um, why do you think that was? Like, what happened prior to really cement those relationships?
Yeah, I think it comes down to shared work,
Mm.
right? So one, working on things we enjoy together that have no uh, there was no remuneration, or there was no transaction, right, involved. Like it wasn't transactional. It was learning first, curiosity first, right?
Mm.
What is it that we're excited about learning together, right? That's where it started. And it built from there. And it was, who do we know that's interested in what we're learning, right? And sharing the learning, building like I don't want to say community, but building the kind of space where people could have these conversations that we were interested in, understanding that they're not in the typical like workplace. That
Mm.
said, like the people I work with, they also have the traditional work, right? So you can have a bit of both. You can blend these things in your life. You don't have to have just the one, right? You don't have to have just the 9 to 5. You could also experiment with other things alongside it. But it's difficult to do it alone. So I think there's like the myth of the entrepreneur who is a solo act and builds this thing, but there's always like employee number one and employee number two. I think I was employee, technically in that concept, I was like employee friend number one, right? It was, here's a lot of stuff that can happen. Are you interested in helping me? And then I said, hey, other person, are you interested in learning? And other person, come on board. So it was like continuously inviting people that we knew were curious and interested in learning the thing that we were learning about.
That's really cool. And something you mentioned earlier, that reminded me of this book by Daniel Coyle,
Mm.
I believe it's called The Culture Code. And he starts off in the book about a story of a researcher at Stanford that was kind of created this like fun game with these rules, and it was all about how can we get this team to collaborate. And
Mm.
they found that the kindergartners did way better than CEOs and engineers
Mm.
and designers. And then they found that the kindergartners, so then they created they were like, well, the kindergartners are kind of cross functional, they're not specialized. So let's create a cross-functional group, CEOs, engineers, etc. And still, the cross-functional group did better, but the kindergartners still did best.
Wow. Okay.
And the theory is that when you take professionals and adults, they spend most of their time essentially sizing each other up. They're trying to figure out where they sit on the ladder of power.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's powerful.
So think about if you start relationships first,
right.
like ignore how can we get past this power stuff, because it wastes so much time, and I think it impedes collaboration.
And how do you pause to understand that, especially if you're in an environment where, it's like, this is a product, we need to build it in this way, otherwise, it won't pass the RFP. Like, we have to do it this way. We can't pause and ask questions. We just can't. Like, this is the way it's been done. So yeah, I mean, I'll try and find the name of the author. Irene Caselli, I think, writes about the first 1,000 days and how much of our life is formed, like it's our code, I guess, is built in those first 1,000 days, and how are we how that shows up throughout your life until you're fully formed at the age of 25, right? You're basically the same human. Like, whatever you go through in those first 1,000 days sticks with you. And we like to think that we are, we are adults, but really I think the definition of adulthood is kind of loose. And there's also the work of Robert Keegan with adult development, right? So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things that I don't think, unfortunately, people treat as luxury, but I think it's foundational to how people work together.
That's right. And I think the thing is when we were talking about factories and just like it was a very noble thing, and let's just pump out this widget, then we thought about business in a certain way, and now I think that thinking is very ingrained as far as like, how much does it cost to push this widget in and push this raw material in and get this widget out? Right. And if we take that thinking into our teams and that style of leadership, we're going to really stifle innovation and collaboration.
Yeah, and just the ability to recognize the humanity in each of us. Right?
That's right. But you can't realize the humanity if you're expecting people to show up as robots.
Yeah. God, yeah. I mean, God, that's one thing I'm trying to figure out right now. It's, I had this conversation, and this person, I don't have the authority to share their name, so I'll just say what they shared with me. And it was, there was a realization that there's like the loud world, right? And the loud world are the things that the world focuses on. So it's like 9 to 5, like make money, career, right? Material things. And then there's like, it's like almost like a polarity, right? So there's like loud world and quiet world. So quiet world are the things that the world doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to, like, equity and justice. And then even within us, like within our own world, there's like the loud things that we pay a lot of attention to. Like, it could be family, it could be, I don't know, like, God,
the squeaky wheel, man. It's it's the thing that's just like, it's there.
Yeah. And then on the other side, like the quiet part, which is, the things that we should be paying more attention to, which is, mental health, just breathing, right? Understanding what you want to prioritize, being able to pause and do that. So I know there's like a long weekend coming up here in the States. So I don't know how people will numb the loud, but, paying attention to the quiet is really important. And I think the quiet in the team is also very important. Like, who is silent and why are they silent? And how do you allow them the opportunity to share who they are and what they have to offer?
Man, I love this. That is so powerful.
I also have to give you kudos because, I think the first time I showed up at your conference, I'd never done a speaking engagement, right? And I just sent like a random, Google form. And I was like, hey, I want to do this. Why not? My friend encouraged me to. And, 3 years later, we're like friends. So I really appreciate you for listening, like being intentional about listening. I think I want to say.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And
Yeah.
we're at a point where we're 5 minutes over the scheduled time. I knew that might happen. I love chatting with you. So we're gonna have
Thanks,
to
Jeff.
shut down now. But man, let's talk again soon.
For
And
sure.
enjoy the rest of your day. And
Yeah.
we'll talk again.
Enjoy your week. Yeah. And say hello to the team.